Today, we're talking about unlocking secrets of high performance teams. And hi, my name is Bobby Lee Hugh. I'm the Chief Content Officer at commonsku. Prior to joining commonsku, I ran a distributorship for over 20 years, and we ran about 10 million in sales. We focused on company stores and program business. So if you haven't met me before, just know that I come from the business like you, and I'm very familiar with the chaotic world that you left or now are part of. Hopefully you can see my beautiful screen there that says Unlocking Secrets of High Performance Teams, and you can hear me okay. But I wanted to welcome you again. Thanks for being here. One more time, feel free to say hi in the chat or throw your questions. Otherwise, we'll get started. Unlocking Secrets of High Performance Teams. There we go. I know this is what the industry can feel a little bit like right now. So I encourage you for the next 30 minutes just to pause, shut down the Slack, shut down the email if you can. I know it's really hard to do, but I want to challenge you to spend a few minutes to work on your business and not in your business, because I know what the deadline-driven industry is like and how chaotic your world can be. And I know that this is what the industry often feels like, because I want to offer a caveat before we get started. And that is, when I make suggestions through this presentation, know that you don't have to accomplish everything that I'm going to show you. Don't get overwhelmed by that. And at the end, I'm going to show you how to pick just one or two things that you can focus on. Some of you are pros and you showed up just to see how you could up your game. Some of you might be new distributors and you might have just joined the industry and you're curious how it works. You're curious what kind of metrics people measure. You're curious how the functionality exists. So we're going to cover all of that today. So first, though, we're going to touch on 10 characteristics that every high performance team member should possess. And I hope this is incredibly helpful for you no matter what you're doing, whether you use this in your hiring or whether you use this in your one-on-ones or performance reviews. But before we get into the integration and the work of what a high performance team does together, I want you to be able to evaluate an individual or individual performance based on a certain measurement of characteristics, all right, or traits. And here are 10 traits that have become absolutely invaluable to anyone successful in the branded merch business. Whether it's branded merch print, promo, it's becoming a very agnostic world in which we are serving clients. Just know that these 10 characteristics often exhibited by the best in the business, okay? The number one is curiosity. When you're hiring or when you're evaluating an employee's performance, keeping them curious or making sure they keep a curious mind is one of the most important things. You're going to learn about dozens and dozens of imprint processes, hundreds of thousands of products, all kinds of projects. A curious mind will keep you engaged. In fact, many people say that when you get in the business, you never can leave the business. And that's because the industry is so fascinating. It's so challenging, overwhelming at times. It's so rewarding. It's also a lot of fun when we can get away from the pressure of deadlines. But it also keeps you engaged. And people that come in often don't leave for that very reason. So evaluate folks on whether they have a curious mind. Number 2, flexibility. Being able to pivot from one situation to the next is one of the most important aspects of a business. You all know this. If you've been in this industry for only a week, you already know that you are pivoting from a problem to a solution all the time. Maybe it was an out of stock. Maybe it was a project that went south with a client. Maybe it's a hard project for a client you're trying to put together all the complex details for. But flexibility is a really important part for anyone who wants to see success in the business. Okay, number 3, respectful tenacity. Do all your team members have this attribute, which is a respectful tenacity? Meaning they can negotiate with suppliers if there's a problem with the project, but they can do so respectfully and kindly. It's very, very important. Supplier partners are your vital partners. Without them, you don't have half a business. They're vital to us in terms of our success. So negotiating with suppliers, but also working with clients. Some of the best salespeople in the business, some of the best account executives, and note that I'm going to use the word salesperson as a generality here. It could apply to anyone that's working with the client, but they have a respectful tenacity too. They might have to tell the client no in a very respectful way that also keeps the client. They also might have to work and negotiate with the client if something went wrong. So they need to possess this real respectful tenacity. Number 4, they need to have on their team an exactitude and a thoroughness. Detail-oriented is a very important feature in this business. Now, a lot of salespeople will say they're not detail-oriented, and I understand that. This is where your systems can come into play, and this is where your team can come into play, which we'll get into in a minute. A very well integrated and orchestrated team can help you with this. But some measure of exactitude and some measure of thoroughness is very, very important. Joe, go ahead. I think you can throw it in the chat there if you want, a question you have. But exactitude and thoroughness, or a detail-oriented temperament, tempered by deadlines. Number 5, patience. Being able to have patience, grace under pressure. Because this is a very deadline-driven business, we need to be able to exude that patience and possess patience. Thanks, Joe. No problem. We need to be able to have patience. Grace under pressure is really, really important. It's surprising at times that promotional merchandise, the branded merchandise business, can be stressful. And some of you are laughing because you're thinking, of course it's stressful. But folks looking on the outside, it looks like a very simple business. It's actually a very complex supply chain, a very simple deliverable in some instances, but it's very complex. And in that sense, they need to be able to possess patience, grace under pressure. All right, number 6, conscientiousness. They need to care strongly about the outcome of each project. This is vital. You know, there's a saying, you go from 0 to hero in this business in just 2 seconds. You deliver on an amazing project for a customer, and you turn around the next week and something fell through. This conscientiousness and this need to care strongly about the outcome of every order is really, really important for the longevity of your clients and your client relationships. All right, number 7. And this characteristic has probably grown more strongly over the past 2, 3, 4 years because we've entered a virtual environment, and we've entered an environment where there are more B2B decision makers in every decision. And that's number 7, which is interdependence, working harmoniously with every team member. Nearly every business I know goes through a scenario or multiple scenarios where they have a colleague or a team member who is difficult to work with or can be, and they just need to be trained or communicated with in a way that helps them understand that interdependence in this business is really not an option. It's absolutely vital. Working harmoniously with every team member is really, really important. And as I mentioned, we are now in a virtual environment, so interdependence has become more important than ever. And the B2B business has grown. The supply chain has grown more complex, and B2B buyers have multiplied. You used to be able to walk into a B2B decision maker, present a solution and get an answer. And now you have 2 or 3 people, sometimes upwards of 6 or 7, making a decision by committee. So interdependence is really, really important that you understand how complex those relationships are. Okay, number 8, initiative. I think that's all I need to say about that one, but initiative, vitally important. Number 9, confidence. Confidence in this business might mean something than it does to other businesses. I was talking with Sandy Gonzalez, the CEO of Made to Order, and I asked her, what's the most successful trait, the most important trait that the most successful salespeople possess, whether they are pros or whether they are brand new? And she said, this is the trait I'm going to share with you, is the one that even pros struggle with, and that's confidence. And it's, in this business, it can be difficult because confidence is somewhat malleable in this sense. You can't have confidence about inventory levels sometimes. You can't have confidence about production details. There are times where you do not feel confident about what's going on, but you can be confident in that you have supplier partners who far above average take care of you and your projects. You can have confidence that you and your team know what you're doing. You can have confidence in your team have been through this scenario before, and you will figure a solution out. In fact, confidence comes more from how we feel about our team and our team's performance and our ability to help a client through a project than it does some of the variables that we might measure against. So confidence is about exploring the unknowns through the certainty of the skills that you do know. One of the most important, and probably number 10 is the most important trait for an individual in this business. And this is adopting a client mindset. Back in the day, it was that only salespeople dealt directly with clients and that the rest of us were sort of serve the salespeople through the salesperson to the client. That world's disappeared. Now the sales team has become far more democratized, and we now have pods of sales teams working with clients and their projects. So you could have virtually any team member talking with a client at any time or helping them through a solution. Now your business model might be different. Maybe yours is not configured that way, but on the whole, we're seeing more and more interaction with clients by more and more team members. So adopting a client mindset is important. Understanding what that means is not just that the customer is important. What that means is that you understand what's at stake for the client. You understand what's really at stake for the client themselves. Peter McCutcheon from Harper & Scott was nominated as ASI's 2022 Distributor Salesperson of the Year. He grew over 250% and hit 8 figures in sales. An interesting attribute about Peter is that he used to be a client, actually in the merchandise space. So he understood how they think. And that ability, Mark Graham, commonsku's co-founder, and I were sitting at Harper & Scott's headquarters just a few months ago. We was able to talk to Peter and talk about some of these things. His ability to understand intuitively what was at stake with a client project was vitally important to his success. Knowing how they think helps them operate in a far more efficient, proficient, confident manner. So adopt a client mindset. Use Danny Meyer's exercise. Danny Myers is known as one of the most revered people in the restaurant and food business. He has an exercise where he calls the client exercise or the customer exercise. When you're hiring somebody new on your team, or when you're evaluating performance, particularly when you're hiring someone new, this is helpful. Imagine that employee coming on board, working with your most important client with the most complex project that you can imagine. So take your number one client, think through a kitting project or something that involves multiple touches, multiple aspects, and ask, can this person be trusted to work with that client, help them through to find a solution? Of course, they're going to have to learn and grow into that, but you can identify some of those characteristics early on, all right? Take a moment at some point during your week or your day and just evaluate your performance, your team's report card. This is a report card created by Kool Moe Dee. I believe this is back in the 90s, that he did for his colleagues that were in the rap music business. And he graded them on scales of vocabulary, articulation, creativity, originality. I challenge you to come up with your own report card that fits your own team and your own culture and measure that performance against it. You know, how are your team with clients and suppliers? With engagement, is your team constantly curious about trends and ideas? With clients, can your colleagues handle convos with your top client? Confidence, does your team exude confidence despite uncertainties with your customer? I can't tell you how helpful it is to a customer to hear, customer, Sue, I don't know the answer to that right now, but I will be back on the phone with you in 15 minutes to give you an update or to get you an answer. There are things like that you can learn about confidence that are really, really important. Initiative, does your team solve problems before they reach you as the sales leader, as the business owner, as the manager? All right. Again, these are just a few. I challenge you to come up with your own report card that you're going to use with your team that's going to evaluate. Make it fun, make it creative, but hit these high important. Take of those 10 characteristics, what you think are the most important for you and your culture, and build them and adapt them according to your needs. Okay. So those, again, were just 10 characteristics that identify the most successful people in the business, whether you're hiring or whether you're reviewing performance. I want to tell you a quick story about the Red Bull team. You might not know in Formula One racing. Formula One racing is one of the most watched events in the world. And the Formula One Red Bull racing team actually just set the world record for the quickest pit stop in the history of racing. And they did this in 2 seconds. Now, if you can imagine how fast that is, a pit stop world record in under 2 seconds. That's this fast. Sorry for the oversimplification, but that's how fast that car came into the pit and was back on the track in 2 seconds. Red Bull team leader Christian Horner said this, that your biggest asset is your people and the brain power and the way they work together. That's what drives the performance of the car moving forward. It has become imperative that an interdependence that a high performance team has things like specially defined roles, which we'll get to right now, but also that everyone understands their job and that they work well together, communicating. So under 2 seconds, we're going to return to this analogy in just a minute, because I think it's the perfect analogy for our complex industry, as complex as it has become. Right now, we're going to cover the 5 traits of high performance teams, the 5 kick-ass traits that high performance teams possess. Now, before we covered the 10 characteristics that every individual should have, these are the 5 traits that we see the most the high performance teams possess. Now, keep in mind, we serve a platform of folks that run in sales or just over a billion in revenue, and they're growing at a faster rate than the industry average. So we're in a very unique position to see how high performance teams function. And we've noticed that these are 5 things that all high performance teams do. Okay. Number 1, high performance teams respect both sides of the promo brain. What do I mean by that? The promo brain consists of 2 parts. The promo brain consists really of a creative side of the business and a logistical side of the business. The creative side is the side that we use when we're thinking of ideas for clients, or when we're doing strategic planning for our business, or prospecting and researching for prospects, or when we're doing marketing or design. The promo brain, the creative brain, thinks through creative problem solving. So it's not always just about creativity in that sense. It can be creative problem solving, like trying to come up with complex kitting design for a project. The logistical side of the business, and honestly one where the industry has spent far more time in, has to do more with the order processing side, the order follow-up side, navigating supply chain and coming up with solutions, fulfillment and kitting, billing, accounts receivable, accounts payable. So those are, to oversimplify things, are the 2 parts of the creative promo brain. The reason why this is important, that it's really important to understand where your colleagues and your teammates are at in their position in the company. So if you're viewing this in your colleague, of other folks in the business, it's important to know not only how you're wired and what your role is, but it's very, very important to understand what the other team member's role is. I encourage you to go check out at some point the Formula One Racing Pit Crew Red Bull video where they talk about their different roles, because the person that's jacking up the car is completely different from the person that's obviously installing the tire versus the person that is checking on other details. So they all have their own role within the business, and they all need to function in a different way. Same thing in the promo business. If you're in a logistical role, maybe you're in a production manager role, probably 85% of your role is logistical. A lot of your role is managing those kinds of details. If you're in, depending on the name or what you call them, it can be a sales support or a production role or something like that. But you're on the logistical side of the business, so you function on that. Maybe 15% of your brain is used for creative thinking and creative critical thinking. Now, again, this is an oversimplification, but know where your role resides and where your colleague's role resides. Now, if you're in the creative side, maybe you're in sales, or maybe you're in marketing. On the creative side, you're probably using 70% of your brain power for creative thinking, creative critical thinking, creative constructive thinking, just creativity in general. Maybe this is creative strategy with clients, how to get a client from A to B is a creative strategic thinking mode. And then maybe 30% is logistic. Maybe you are concerned with 30% of it being, when's that order going to get here? How is it in production? Those kinds of things. It's really also important to know this, is just a pause, that as the sophistication in the B2B buyer grows, if you're in the sales role, if you're in a marketing role like this, you need to make sure you're spending that kind of time in this part of your brain as well. Okay, just a caveat there. It's really important. A high performance team understands what their colleagues need to do their jobs well, particularly leadership and management. Creative people need space to do creative work. Logistical folks need info that doesn't hold them up from doing their work. So here's a few things what the creative promo brain needs. They need less interruptions and more freedom to think. Context switching is that thing that we do when we switch from working on a project for a client where we're trying to come up with creative ideas, and suddenly our brain tells us, this is hard, we need to go see what's happening on Facebook or Instagram, or we see 3 Slack messages pop up in the corner of our screen. Context switching, there was one study that showed that for every interruption, it takes us 23 minutes to regain our focus. Context switching is really, really hard. The average worker is distracted roughly 1 in every 3 minutes. That's an astounding figure. 1 in every 3 minutes. One study showed that pings, DMs, checking emails, social causes a drop in workers' IQ by an average of 10 points. You probably don't need me to convince you of that because it's probably painfully obvious. But here's the deal. That's twice the knock to your IQ that you get when you smoke cannabis. You're probably wondering why I had a picture of somebody holding a joint. This is why. That the study showed that interruptions cause a drop in workers' IQ by an average of 10 points. This is from the book Stolen Focus by Johann Hari. He said this, quote, "So this suggests in terms of being able to get your work done, you're better off getting stoned at your desk than checking your texts, Slack, Twitter, and Facebook messages a lot. What the promo brain needs is less interruptions and more productivity." And really the biggest threat to a salesperson or creative person's productivity is their own self-interrupter, their own internal self-interrupter. We often don't need a lot of help, but it helps to know what your colleagues in the business needs. Beware of creativity drain if you're in these roles. If you spend all of your time context switching, you won't have brain power for creative thinking. Okay. Now, what does the logistical promo brain need? What do those folks need? First of all, they need everyone getting the details in the system from the beginning. That's what the logistical promo brain needs. They need clean handoffs at every stage. If you've come here and you're a CommonSku client, you already know that the system powers you to do that. If you're unfamiliar with that, this is what the system powers you to do, clean handoffs at every stage. But this is really, really important if you don't have a system that manages this for you, but it's also really important that you get the details in the system. In-app communication at all times has become more important than ever. Most of you, the complexity with your client projects have grown exponentially, and therefore it's more important than ever that you get those details in the system. Be considerate about what your logistical colleagues need. You want to create a flow state with your team and not a fragmented state. Fragmentation makes you smaller, shallower, and angrier. Flow makes you bigger, deeper, and calmer. Fragmentation shrinks us, flow expands us. So understand what they need, okay? High performance teams, number 2, they need to keep their systems simple and few. Systems, before we all apply our own definition of systems, it's actually a pretty general term. Systems are simply a way of doing things. So that every day when you go to work or you get up to go to work, whatever your process is in the morning, whether you shower first or you have breakfast or you get your coffee, you have a system for your morning before you tackle your day. So systems are simply a way of doing things. But this is really important. Michael Gerber, in a famous book for entrepreneurs called The E-Myth, talked about this in the sense that all entrepreneurs develop systems. Sometimes in our business, it is so important that we manage what kind of systems that we use, because a lot of systems can be complicated. They can be too busy. They can slow us down. They're very congested. So you want to watch for systems that actually can make you lithe and flexible and expedient. You need something modern, fast, and efficient. There's an article by McKinsey in a research study that talked about the next normal after the pandemic, that B2B sellers need to be thinking about integrated systems rather than sets of individual technologies. This model combines, and this is a quote, cloud-based digital technologies and agile operation capabilities in an integrated, well-sequenced approach that can rapidly accelerate digital strategy and transformation. I know that sounds like a research speak, so let me simplify it for you. Our industry and the business has gotten really, really complex. A lot of folks are building technologies on top of technologies on top of technologies until they built a Frankenstein, and they have this deck that complicates what is already a complicated business. You need systems that are simplify this business and make a flow state, create a flow state and not a fragmented state. There's a great article you should check out at some point by Darius Farrow called Why More Technology Does Not Equal More Productivity. Some of us keep tacking on things and tacking on things. We need to be sure that we create a flow state and not a fragmentation state. Systems run the business and people run the systems. So all of your systems should be integrated, from pre-sales customer management through to presentations, estimates, to sales orders, artwork, shops, purchase orders, invoicing and billing. All of that should be integrated. If you're on CommonSku, you already know that this happens. If you're not, just know that this is something you need. You need to simplify your systems so you can scale. I know that we sell a software system, but I can tell you whether or not I was doing this presentation on behalf of us at CommonSku, that with over 20 years in the experience in the business, a fragmented and slowed system will not allow you to scale. It will impede your growth and slow you down. So this is what a high performance team really needs. That team that is in charge of that Formula One racing, that pit crew team, they not only have the right people in the right place, but they have the right tools to get the job done fast. All right, number 3, high performance teams, once you have that system, they get accurate and complete details in the system from the get-go. It sounds like, again, a real oversimplification, but it's really important, especially for this business, because we keep a lot of information in our heads that we haven't translated in the system. You're looking at a picture of a monkey named Pager. He's playing ping pong with only his brain while sipping a banana milkshake. There are no wires going from Pager to the computer screen. This has been a big development from Neuralink, a company that developed brain-machine interface. And I just use it as an example. We're not there yet. We don't have it yet where we have created an osmosis experience where you can go from talking to the client to just thinking those in the system. You need to be getting those details in the system at all times. There are over 3,500 suppliers and manufacturers in this business. If you're new to this business, this might be a surprising number to you. There are about 1 million products or more, and probably tons more. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of clients. As you can see from just a very simple graph, the business is incredibly complex. You have to be sure you're getting details in the systems. The moral of the story is get it and keep it in the system, because your brain in this business will always have way too many tabs open, okay? Everything in app all the time. All right, number 4, we're almost there. We only have 2 more things. Number 4, high performance teams have defined specialized roles. Going back to this Formula One racing pit crew, everyone on the pit crew has a job. There's someone jacking up the car on the front end. There's someone jacking up the car on the back end. There are 4 different tire replacement teams. There's someone checking on the driver. There's someone literally up front checking I know what they're called, but you race fans will know. There's these 2 aerodynamic tools on the front of a car that helps with wind dynamics. And you have 1 team member on each of those all the time. So again, a pit crew in under 2 seconds can have that Formula One racing car in and back on the track. It's an astounding feat. In your business, as you scale, I don't want you to get frustrated by this if you're a small team, if you're a team of under 5 or a team of under 3, if you're a solopreneur. Do not get frustrated by this. I share this with you so you can know and understand where you need to grow. Often a founder or CEO will start out and they'll end up hiring either an account coordinator to help them with their work, or they'll end up hiring a salesperson to help with business development, and they'll just begin to grow from there. I want to show you an example of a graphic that can show you how your team can grow. Now, you might have different names for these roles, and you might have even different functionalities. So you might create a team structure that's completely different. But typically, this is what a team structure might look like in this business. You would have the founder, CEO, or managers or VPs at one level. And then you have account managers and business development folks. Then you have account coordinators that are working with those account managers. You'll notice like account manager might have different names. Project manager on your team, maybe it's salesperson. Then you might have an entire layer of folks that are involved in design and marketing. A couple of roles that are really growing in the industry over the past few years have been marketing and production. Marketing production roles have really, really grown. But then you might have fulfillment, kitting, warehousing, shops, and finance. But this is just to give you an idea that you should grow to scaling your business, because specialization creates a flywheel effect. And generalization leads to too much burnout. So as you grow, know that you need to scale. I can tell you this from personal experience, that one of my biggest challenges growing a business from 0 to 10 million twice, because we went through a recession. I say that just to tell you, I've got some war wounds, not to brag. But one of the biggest mistakes was not growing the right infrastructure to scale our business, because we could have scaled faster and actually grown more in sales if we had known how to scale the business appropriately in the first place, okay? Again, one distributor said it to me this way: having salespeople manage production is the same as saying you wouldn't want your design team over finance. Just know as you grow, you're going to need to scale your business. High performance teams have specialized roles. Okay, final point. High performance teams measure their performance against KPIs. They're key performance indicators, whether they're weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annually. Something you might not know about that Red Bull Formula One racing team is that pit crew broke their record 3 times, worked the world record 3 times, twice before in practice that year. So this is a team that had constantly been breaking their record as they moved along. 3 times they broke the world record just in that year alone, because they were aware of what metrics they needed to break, of what they were aiming for. So here's some ideas for some KPIs for your business. You might have year-to-date sales against previous year as one KPI. You might have average margin per customer. I'm not going to give you here are the 3 ones you should be using at all times, but I will tell you the 2 or 3 most important ones. But I want to give you a list of ideas that you can borrow from, because some of you might already be doing some of this, but you might not be doing others. So year-to-date sales against the previous year is one metric. Another metric is average margin per customer. I love doing this every 6 months. I thought it was really, really important to look at average margin per customer, because that's something that you can take for granted, that you're making really good profit with a particular client because you're doing so many projects and you're so busy that you might not realize that you're working for a less dollar than you ever have before, right? Number 3, a per client minimum annual sales threshold. Per client minimum annual sales threshold is a KPI you might have. So you might want to grow those clients to a certain threshold at a minimum. A quote to order ratio, number of orders per year based on quotes. Another one I like to look at was a 6-month review of gross profit by clients in declining order. And then probably the most important one is your measuring your monthly sales targets by booked orders and invoiced orders, ideally both. There's a commonsku feature update we have coming out on 5/31. commonsku customers have always been able to measure good performance metrics against sales. On 5/31, you'll be able to measure both sales targets by booked orders and invoiced orders in commonsku. So how is that important? You get down to those individual performances in the pit crew. Everyone has their own metrics. Not only does the pit crew have a metric that they're measured against, but everyone has their own individual metrics, how quickly they can get in and get out and do their job. Same thing with sales. You as a salesperson might want to start measuring your own sales success against your booked orders or invoice orders or both. So comparing your booked orders, the orders that you actually created with clients in June compared to last year's June, so you can continue to measure against those. My favorite ones are this monthly sales targets by booked orders and invoice orders, the average margin per customer that I told you about, and just really understanding my top clients from top revenue or a declining order by gross profit. Those are my most important ones. Remember that a well-connected team actually simplifies the work and puts fun back in business again. I know that we're a serious business because we're serious about productivity and efficiency, but you know our culture, we're also all about how fun this business can be. And that's our job, is to actually put fun back in this business so we can create simplified systems for you and your teams. A well-connected team can make the business fun again for you. Here's an additional bonus article you can read when you have a moment. It's from Harvard Business Review, an article called 5 Things High-Performing Teams Do Differently. They're not afraid to pick up the phone. They're more strategic with meetings. They invest time bonding over non-work topics. They give and receive appreciation more frequently, and they're more authentic at work. All right. Last thought I want to leave you with is Mel Robbins' 5-second rule. Some of you might have heard this before, but you know the 3-second rule we talked about. If you drop some food on the floor and maybe in your part of the world, I don't know if this is common, but it's common in our part of the world, maybe kind of gross. If you drop some food on the floor, you have what's called the 3-second rule. You pick it up and you pop it in your mouth. I know it's gross, but Mel Robbins came up with a book called the 5-second rule. And what she found out was that you need to make a decision in the next 5 seconds on what you've learned here today. I know I covered a lot of details, but in order for you to not just close this out and go back to your deadline-driven business, you need to put this in action. So I'm going to challenge you in the next minute to come up with what your next action is. What is your next step? In other words, in 5 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you need to determine what you're going to do from today's presentation and not just say, I'm going to review that again later and do something about it. So here's some ideas I want to throw at you. Some things that you can do. Maybe you're going to adopt the 10 characteristics I shared with you in the hiring process, and you're going to go add those now. Maybe you're going to write down a plan team for role creation and expansion. Maybe you're not there yet. You haven't grown to that, but you're going to create just on a scratch piece of paper what your plan would be for growing expansion in your team and specialized roles. Maybe you're going to share with your team the 10 characteristics I talked about and bring those up in your next meeting, just as a way to explore and keep these topics top of mind. Maybe you're going to power the promo brains by reviewing your communication policy and how you and your team communicate while you're in Slack or email. And do you talk about giving people room and space to think strategically and creatively. Maybe you're going to contact commonsku if you're new to coming to commonsku for a power up of your systems. Maybe you need integrated systems. Maybe you need a fast, efficient system. Maybe that's your 5-second little action is you're going to reach out now and not delay. Maybe you're going to develop and start measuring the right KPIs for you and your team. Maybe you're a pro, you just showed up to see what you might be missing and you already have all these, but you're missing one of those metrics I talk about that's a little appealing. Whatever yours is, in the time that I just told you about all those, I hope you wrote down a next action. And at the very least, close out this webinar and sit there for just a few minutes to write out what it is that you're going to do after this. All right. Thank you, by the way, for attending this. And I challenge you to go now and build your high performance team. We didn't have any questions in the chat, but I really want to say thank you for joining us today. And I'm so glad you were here. We'll see you soon, my friends.